Good morning and welcome to AI Daily. We have a fun one for you here. We're going to review six papers from the fine folks at Meta at a conference that just is going on right now, the conference on computer vision and pattern recognition. So we're going to get a lot of computer vision related things, and this should be pretty cool. We got six papers we're gonna run through here for you. So I'll kick it off. The first paper is EgoTask. EgoTask is a paper that's focused, and there's another one of these as well that I'll talk about here shortly, is focused on video tasks that are egocentric. So egocentric means it's first person view. Almost imagine you're wearing Apple Vision Pros and you're recording what you're seeing. So all these videos are from the perspective of somebody who's, looking through their own eyes. And obviously this is a specific type of video. And so what we're talking about here is how do we apply, AI to handle these specific types of videos better than if you just have a very general model around videos. And so what they found here is when they're focused on egocentric tasks, say painting versus cooking or playing chess, that you can create better results by having a translator that translates between these types of tasks. So why is this interesting? Why is this useful? I think there's a really, cool example that kind of occurred to me in my own life. Often when I'm thinking of, whenever I play the guitar, a lot of times it kind of strikes me as almost a weird form of painting. The way you move your hands along the guitar's neck is almost like the way you brush or draw brush strokes when you're painting. And I've always kind of like made this weird connection between the two. This paper is sort of implying something similar, which is to say that, if you show how somebody is playing chess or how somebody is painting, you can create a different video of a different task and potentially use that to learn. So there is a lot of similarities between different egocentric tasks. Cooking and painting, despite what you may think, have a lot of similarities in how your hand moves. So if you happen to be someone who's very good at cooking, you could use this to watch videos, generate a video of painting that kind of uses the same hand motions that you were doing when you were cooking. So it's essentially creating a connection in your mind so that you can do this new thing with something that you already know how to do. I thought that was a really interesting thing. And, again, what they're trying to accomplish here is a more specific understanding and translation in a more limited domain. It's not trying to be everything for every type of video. It's trying to use this for, just egocentric videos. So yeah, that was the first one.
Yeah,
Connor?
that makes sense. That plays into well. It's just kind of like a self-awareness between the egocentric of different activities. So
Yeah.
yeah. Next up, we have PACO. Meta announced PACO, which is parts and attributes of common objects. Basically, just a large-scale database which provides object mass, part mass, object level attributes, and part level attributes. So when you have a picture of a frame of different objects, instead of just saying, "Oh, here's a laptop," you can say, "Oh, here's a laptop monitor. Here's a laptop keyboard that is white." So it has the segmentation of the different parts, but then B, also it can label different parts of different attributes. So you have very specific details about images. So this is a very large data set, hundreds of different objects, very wide of types of information. And this again relates back to another data set and model that Meta released about a few months ago now called SAM, Segment Anything. So again, another very useful model. This is just a data set, but it is open source and commercially licensed. So feel free to use it however you want. And if you're training an AI for open source computer vision that needs all these specific colors, like, oh, red car wheels, not just like a car, then this is a very useful model for that.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that EgoTask is currently non-commercial.
Yes.
Super cool. Yeah, next up we have GeneCIS. So GeneCIS is a new benchmark, and their goal is pretty much to say, hey, how do we measure a model's ability to test similarity of images? So if you've ever worked on similarity of images, of course, hey, we can take one picture and another picture and say, oh, is there a dog in this picture? You can do similarity based on objects, but similarity based on colors and textures and objects and combining all these things to say, hey, is this similar vibes to this other image? And that's really what this benchmark proposes, is how do we measure a model's ability to compare similarity? So two interesting things from this. One is that they found that clip So a clip is the model from OpenAI to measure, a connection between text and an image. It found that that performed badly on this benchmark, and also a lot of models that are great at computer vision, so models that perform well on ImageNet, for example, did not really perform well within this similarity test. So they also proposed a kind of new way to mine text data and image data to try to improve similarity scores. But really cool applications, I think, to fashion or just any kind of computer vision that you want to say, hey, how do we compare two images that you can't fully describe just based on objects or just based on colors? How do we measure their similarity? And GeneCIS is really trying to tackle that. So it is not commercially available, but a really cool way if you have a new model, new image model you're testing, a great benchmark to test that out.
Very cool. All right, our next one is called LaVila, which is learning video representations from large language models. And what they're doing here is essentially fine-tuning an LLM, for example, GPT-2, on visual inputs to create video narrators. And what they found is that when you do this, what you get is a much richer narration of a video. And interestingly enough, they're using the same egocentric video data set as the EgoTask group is, which is something like, I think, 10,000 hours or 100 hours of video on 10,000 different tasks. It's a pretty large data set of egocentric video. And so, for example, they find that maybe you have a video where a basic video image translator is giving you something like, this person is separating some yarn. Well, what they found is when they fine tune an LLM on these sort of videos plus their narrations, they can get much richer descriptions. So instead of just, person separates the yarn, it's person pulls out the yarn with their right hand. Or instead of just this person, person lifts container, it becomes person lifts container and wipes the countertop. And what they found is that once they've done this, they can go back over video that is very sparsely narrated and actually re-narrate the whole thing with a much richer narration, with much more rich understanding of what's going on in the model. So what they're essentially, we've talked about this a trillion times, is they're leveraging one AI model to sort of boost another AI model, and together they're more powerful than if it was just kind of trained on its own. So I thought this was really interesting. And this is commercially available. And it's a way for you to, we'll probably start seeing things like this in YouTube, where the narration can be just even richer than just what the people are saying. And then sometimes if the audio is lost, for example, it can generate a narration from just the video.
Very cool.
I like it. Next up, we have Galactic. Galactic is a large-scale simulation and reinforcement learning framework for robotic mobile manipulation in indoor environments. So essentially, they built a very large-scale framework that iterates over and over to train a robot to move objects in an environment. They gave it different kinds of environments, different kinds of robotic setups, but in the end, it's essentially a robot that can move and has a 7 degrees of freedom arm. And it just teaches it, hey, you find a can over here, can you move it to the trash? Or, hey, you find this on the floor, can you move it to the counter? A very large scale framework. I believe they trained it in at 100,000 steps per second. So extremely fast to train, extremely reliant to train on just 8 GPUs. And they taught it how to move objects. Very exciting for robotics and being able to scale this reinforcement learning to teach complex tasks like this.
Was this simulated robotics or actual robots?
It's simulated robotics, but again, it's robotics. It's just like a simple arm. So they're applied to a real world robot. But the big part of it being simulated was that they can train it much faster, of course, than they can
Right.
train non-simulated. So
Yeah.
yes, Galactic is non-commercial also.
Very cool. Last up, we have HierVL. So HierVL is a hierarchical video language embedding. So video language embedding is pretty much when you're saying, hey, take this video and explain to me what's happening in it. And there's a lot of models that can take, 3, 5, maybe even 10 seconds of a clip and say, hey, this person is, chopping an onion. But when you take that up and you say, hey, what's happening across a 20-minute long video, that's becomes a problem for a lot of these models. So what HierVL does is it pretty much trains both on the short clips as well as a summary of the entire clip. So taking chopping an onion, putting it in a pot and understanding that the entire video is about you making a soup. So a really cool way to improve understanding and describing a long form video. Imagine giving it a movie and saying, hey, what happens in this movie? Like explain the actual movie to me versus just specific pieces of it. So that's what hierarchical video language embedding is. I think it's a really cool paper if, you know, you have any of these applications of reviewing drone footage, reviewing a body cam footage, reviewing whatever it may be. How can we improve that across these long form videos? And that's what people are beginning to stab at. So this one is non-commercial, but a really kind of great viewpoint of where these video language embeddings are going.
How long of videos can it process, you know?
For this one, I think it's up to probably about 30 minutes. It's like what they're training them on. So they're training them on pretty much the long form summary of these videos. I imagine this scales up even further than that, but I'm not sure if it was trained on that.
Interesting.
Big year at the Conference on Computer Vision and Pattern Recognition. Get ready for Apple Vision Pro, cool apps to be leveraging some of these technologies, because the Vision Pro is not going to be on your head for another year, which is about 1,000 years of development in the world of AI. So these will all be like silly little jokes a year from now when you can actually use your Apple headset, which will be pretty awesome to see. What else are we seeing out in the real world? I read a little story about OpenAI planning to open an app store for AI models that people build on top of OpenAI structure. Not a lot of information on it. Something people have been anticipating. We're seeing OpenAI start getting closer and closer to its own little app store, which I'm sure will be pretty big news. The cool thing about the folks at OpenAI is that they're willing to do things early. Plugins, for example, they did early, and then they came out and said, you know what, plugins aren't, quite doing all the things that we thought they would do, and I think that's a pretty awesome position to take as a company, to kind of try things early, get stuff out there, and just be honest about whether or not it's crushing it or not. I don't think they need to worry about crushing it over there at OpenAI. The world is consumed with everything post GPT-3 launching, so probably some more awesome stuff coming out, and we're looking forward to seeing what the App Store is like.
Is that like a prompt app store it's going to be, or like an actual like models, or do we not know?
Apparently it's, selling or monetizing your own models that you've built off of OpenAI. Tough to really know exactly what they mean.
I guess they do have fine tuning plan for
Yeah.
GPT-4, GPT 3.5, so probably related to that.
Yeah. Fascinating.
What about you guys?
Ethan, you want
Yeah, well, we covered it a bit yesterday with ByteDance buying, $1 billion of GPU chips and the whole sanctions that are coming. But there was a really nothing too surprising, but a really just kind of fun read about this kind of underground market that's being built and developing in China to get these A100s and H100s. So they talked about a few small vendors out in like Shenzhen selling, kind of this underground black market of A100s. It's a really fun read. And I think it also touches on, Farb's comment from yesterday of how chips really are the new most important thing for humanity. And like our black markets have gone from, whatever they may have been 100 years ago to an NVIDIA A100 chips that startups and researchers and who knows who else are trying to buy underground. And they're charging them, gosh, $20,000 per chip. They retail for about 10,000, and people are going underground. They're saying, hey, can you give me 3 of these chips? Like, you can just imagine what it's like, being on the ground there with these sanctions coming in, how they're going to handle it, how small firms are handling it. We saw ByteDance can put all their weight and pre-order $1 billion. But if you just want a couple chips to train your model at, your local school, well, this is how you're getting it now. So really fun read. We'll link it below and definitely recommend you check it out.
I love Shenzhen. I miss Shenzhen, and I'm going to have to call my friends there and see what's going on. It's been too long since I've been there.
It's a very curious question of how much money ByteDance is putting into the black market GPUs versus the from NVIDIA. So
Probably tough question to get an answer to.
well, if you have that
We're going to
answer,
have some really interesting stories in the next
Well,
week.
you'd be amazed. You talk to people on the best information you can ever get on this stuff is people on the ground.
yep.
Mhm.
You have
They
that
know more than
you have
execs
that
do.
answer, drop it in the comments below. So
All our Shenzhen fans.
all
Yep.
our Shenzhen fans, hearts out to you. Yeah, so I read that, of course, OpenAI, Sam Altman have been calling for AI regulation for the past couple months, few months, past while. So he's been talking to the EU. He's been traveling around the EU to different countries saying, hey, we need regulation. But then Time Magazine, of course, very famous for being fearful of AI and promoting AI fear, has an exclusive story that OpenAI is trying to decrease AI regulation. Not that surprising, of course, because although they are calling for regulation, he has said in the past, if EU overregulates too much, they would have to pull out of the EU. So not too surprising that they want to moderate the amount of regulation, especially in certain domains like education and employment. So interesting story, not too surprising though.
Negotiating in public. Yep. I mean, it's geopolitics, and it's the way things are done, and kudos to them for being savvy enough to know how this stuff works. Well, that was a fun episode. Hopefully you stuck around to hear all the cool papers coming out of the Computer Vision Conference. Nice work, folks at Meta, for continuing to crush the papers on all things AI, and we'll see you tomorrow with more AI Daily.
See you guys tomorrow.
Peace, guys.